going to talk about two levies that Seattle Public Schools is going to have on the ballot very soon. Proposition 1 is an operations levy. Proposition 2 is a BEX Building Excellence, the fourth in the series, capital levy. I wanted to talk a little bit about a context for these levies, and then I'd like to speak a little bit more directly about the operations levy. I'm going to ask Peggy then to make some comments about the BEX capital levy. First of all, both of these levies are replacement levies. These are not new levies. The operations levy passed 3 years ago. It expires now this coming year. This would be the replacement for that. The BEX capital levy, BEX 4, is a 6-year levy, and it replaces the one that was passed 5 years ago and would be the next in the series of our Building Excellence program. I want to acknowledge first and foremost that we do not take it for granted that we are going to receive support all the time and just ask for funding and that our community will automatically support that. I believe it has to be justified each and every time. So these two particular levies have a huge impact in our community and in this city. We know that economically this has been, and we're coming through a tough economic period. The request that we're making combined is for about $150 a year more, about $13 a month for both of these levies combined. We do not take it for granted. It is a privilege to have that support if citizens pass and support us with this. So it's a justified, we believe a justified request, and that's what I'd like to talk about. I think there are two things that if we're fortunate enough to pass these two levies come to mind immediately. One is stewardship. We recognize that there have been some recent times where stewardship has been a concern in Seattle Public Schools. And I want to talk about that a little bit later in my comments, but at this point in terms of stewardship, we know that we have to prove and gain trust from our community in the use of these monies. We believe we can show and will demonstrate that. The second thing I want to talk about is promises made, promises kept. If we're fortunate enough to have the support, one of the things we have to do is to be able to deliver on that support. Our BEX 3 capital levy, for example, we've been able to have our projects in on time and within budget. We think the proof in the pudding is to go through our schools and look at the improvements that have been made. This is something that we know is very, very important. Stewardship and demonstrating the financial responsibility and keeping promises we ask. I want to talk for a moment about the operations levy. The operations levy, Proposition 1, $551 million combined, would be over a 3-year period and covers for us a lot of our day-to-day operating general fund costs. It bridges the gap for the next 3 years between past declining state and federal revenue, including that which the legislature still has not fully funded in basic education, and I'm speaking specifically of the McCleary case. Most notably, these are in areas of basic education, transportation, and special education. Passage of the operations levy enables a school system to offer a sound educational program. One of the things we're able to do in Seattle Public Schools in our secondary buildings is to offer a full 6-period day. We are able to offer staffing for students of all abilities beyond that which is funded, especially in the areas of enrichment, tutorial programs, activities, athletics. It enables and would enable Seattle Public Schools to continue to move forward with very important initiatives, including, most notably, closing the achievement gap, offering science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs, STEM, at places such as Cleveland High School. Recently, opening a new program at Bourne, One of the things that passage of this levy would be able to provide is the continuation and expansion of international education and our international school offerings. Advanced learning programs, career and technical education programs, including most recently an offering of an aerospace program in collaboration with partners at Boeing Field. One of the things that we are attempting to do is to expand career and technical education offerings for children. This would help us to be able to do that. One of the other things is to expand our international baccalaureate program. Passage of this levy will help us to expand and offer that program now at Rainier Beach High School. One of the key considerations that we have currently is concern about and our ability to offer a wide spectrum of arts programs, music, arts education. Our hope is that passage of this levy will be able to give us some of the funding that in partnership with a large grantor would enable us to restore back the levels we used to be in terms of arts education. I want to provide you a context. Right now, the general fund of Seattle Public Schools is starting to near $600 million a year. Over 25% of the funding in that general fund comes from this operations levy. To put a perspective on that, the inability to pass this would mean the loss of over $150 million in funding for our schools and for our children. This is a very, very critical part of our funding in Seattle Public Schools. I want to talk for just a moment about the fact that over the last several years, Seattle Public Schools has undergone over $45 million worth of cuts. One of the things we've had to do is take a hard look at our central administration costs. Approximately 3 years ago, we were expending close to 9% annually out of our general fund on central administration. With the adoption of our budget this year and going into next year, that will be down to slightly below 6%. For a lot of people, a difference of 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're putting 3% across an annual budget that is in excess of $550 million now, that's a reduction of about $16.5 million. So for us, our goal is to push as much as of our funding out to our schools as possible. Part of our request, part of what our citizenry asks, is that we spend the most on education for kids. We are attempting to reduce and have reduced that administrative cost. That means there are more dollars going out into the buildings. That said, we still are considerably behind what the state is funding, and our operations levy becomes a critical component of our annual budget. I want to now talk for a moment about the BEX Building Excellence 4 capital levy. It is a capital levy. That means it will be collected over a 6-year period, 1/6 in each of those 6 years. It is a cash-as-you-go program, if you will. Many school systems have to issue bonds for capital construction. Those bonds carry a significant interest cost associated with them. We're very fortunate here that when we can pass a capital levy, we're able to avoid those kinds of costs. And that stretches dollars further and goes to the classroom. I'd like to ask Peggy for a moment to talk a little bit about some of the particulars of BEX, and then I'd like to come back to some additional comments.
As you know, in years past, our BEX proposals have been primarily about deferred maintenance and building safety. This year, our BEX 4 proposal also is needing to manage the challenge of enrollment growth. As you know, over the last several years, we have continued to have more students enroll in Seattle Public Schools, and in fact, we're projecting that we're going to have an additional 7,000 students enroll in our schools over the next 10 years. So this particular BEX 4 capital levy blends the needs to increase our capacity at our schools, as well as meeting some of our deferred maintenance and safety issues on all of our schools within the building. With that, what we have got is we have 37 major projects related to safety and security and seismic issues. We have 17 major building constructions that will be going on throughout the city. We also have a goal of reducing the number of portables throughout our school. You will see, because of our enrollment growth, that we have had to add portables throughout the schools and city. We want to make sure that at the end of this VEX 4 levy that we will only have 5% of our students' homerooms in portables. So that is part of the goal of this particular VEX levy. We also are looking at technology needs and infrastructure within our district. We need to make sure that we can provide wireless to our schools. We need to make sure that our students are educated in a way that will help them both maximize their instructional time, but will also prepare them to use technology in the future.
I think one of the things that is important here in terms of the VEX request is the fact that if we can reduce our deferred maintenance down, it's extremely positive. There's a saying, all of you in this room have heard it before, pay me now or pay me later. And when we neglect, not to our liking, some of the maintenance that we know we have to do, it often isn't cost effective. This would enable us to significantly reduce that deferred maintenance down to where we're underneath, hopefully $400 million. It would help reduce our reliance on portables, something that we want to be able to achieve by 2020. I think the other thing that I'd like to talk about for a moment is it will address some very critical seismic as well as safety, but very importantly, technology needs. And I want to encourage everyone to realize that the cost of delivering technology to our students, to our staff, in our financial programs, in our student programs, is really critical in today's world. This would enable us to begin to bring wireless into our schools, to do some much needed work with infrastructure and technology, and give us the ability to continue to move forward. I want to talk for a moment about stewardship. I've had a lot of questions for people saying, given what has occurred over the last several years, can I trust Seattle Public Schools to be good financial stewards now? And the answer to that is absolutely. A number of things have occurred over the last 2 years which puts Seattle Public Schools in a much, much better position. First of all, we have new leadership, literally from the top down, including the superintendent, chief financial officer, and other key people in very, very important positions. Most of our capital staff has been with the school system, has risen up, has asked how can we do things more effectively and efficiently, and we have been undertaking that over the last 2 years. We have brought in outside eyes to help us. One of the key things that we did early on was to ask the Educational Service District 112, the Construction Services Group, to come in and assist us in the planning and preparation for this particular capital levy request. We have a VEX Oversight Committee made up of technical content people, engineers and architects that provide advice to us. We have used a Facilities and Capacity Management Advisory Committee, FACMAC, to help guide us with ultimately the recommendations that needed to be made. We also realized that we had to place stronger internal controls. We have gone through, completely redone our internal controls, our procurement procedures, our policies related to financial controls. One of the first things that we did is we have developed now a Department of Internal Audit. We hired a Director of Internal Audit, 2 staff members. Those individuals do not report to the superintendent as had been in the past. The Department of Internal Audit now reports directly to the board, specifically the Audit and Finance Committee Chair. That has given a separate lens on how we're doing business. We've also engaged with the State Auditor's Office in several special audits that has come back to help guide us in terms of the practices that we need to be putting into place to assure the strong fiscal responsibility. I'd like to also just say that in the end, this is a big ask. We do not take it lightly. We know that it would be a privilege to have the support. We would like to earn trust. We want to show the community. I think the proof in the pudding are the programs for children, the improvements to our buildings, the ability for us to continue to move forward. So for us, we know this is a very, very serious request. And we believe that we have the right controls, we have the right people, we have the right programs for moving forward with it. If you have any specific questions, really appreciate the opportunity to answer them. Yes.
I have a specific question about one of the projects and a sort of ancillary thing. I cover news in West Seattle, so this is a West Seattle specific question about this particular school. I understand that at the Operations Committee last week, there were some more specifics possibly about moving up the Arbor Heights rebuild with bridge funding, and I wonder if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yes, one of the things I mentioned a little bit earlier is, let's do just 2 seconds on how a capital levy works. A capital levy, in essence, if it were $600 million, 1/6 or $100 million would be collected each of those 6 years. We obviously have to spread programs to match cash flow. We have to prioritize those that are in greatest need. One of the things that we have been examining is the possibility of looking at, depending upon market conditions, the financial possibility of what I would call revenue or tax anticipation financing. Recently, as most of you know, the market and interest rates have been down. And that may provide us an opportunity, pencil to paper, to be able to potentially accelerate some projects through the use of that type of funding, as well as some of the funding that we have currently in our capital eligible program. However, cash flow is extremely tight. We have everything budgeted out, and there is a reality that this has to be carefully sequenced. So are we going to take a look at it? If it makes sense, absolutely we're going to look hard at doing that. I will say, it does have an interest cost associated with it. So part of what occurs with that is we don't get to borrow a year or two of cash flow without some cost associated with it. That cost has to be borne with anticipation notes primarily out of the general fund. That means we would have to reprioritize within that fund. Will we look at that though and weigh that in the greater good over both funds? Absolutely. And it may be, if the market conditions continue to be good, that might be something that we could entertain.
I understand that there was also some discussion of a little bit of accelerated design so that you would be ready for that.
And that is another issue that enables us to be able to be in a better position. We have content experts with us today. Lucy Morello, our Director of Capital Planning. Lucy, any comments?
I could comment on that we are moving forward with design. We went through the architect engineering selection process for a number of the schools that are on the front end of BEX 4, including selecting an architect in which we'll recommend to the school board at the school board meeting on February 20th to move forward with design so that we don't close the door on being able to design and build Arbor Heights so that we would have Arbor Heights completed 2 years earlier in 2016. And that's the earliest we could move it up, simply because design and construction will take us that long. But we're going through the motions to have that ability and keep that door open to be able to do that and replace Arbor Heights by 2016.
What percentage of all the items on both levies do you kind of consider basic education?
I would tell you that, and certainly within the court system, ironically, I'm right in age with Tom Redmond, so I've been around enough that Duran 1, which was heard by the state, where school systems prevailed. I actually testified in Duran 2. I'm a bit of a person from Missouri. I'm going to believe the funding when I see it, even with McCleary. I believe that the majority of what is in that operations levy truly is to help support basic education, whether it's transporting children, whether it's helping them to get to standard, whether it is giving them some people would call it enrichment. I think you're going to get a lot of people who will tell you that even having exposure to some of the things beyond the 3 R's for my generation are considered to be very, very basic right now. The ability to have exposure to the arts. That's very, very important. I think when you go into the Beck's capital levy part, you're going to get an opportunity to walk through this building in a moment. We have buildings in Seattle Public Schools that are over 100 years old. I was telling somebody the other day, I had to put a roof on my house, and it's 25 years old. I was wishing that roof was going to last a little longer. And I look here, for us just to keep up with infrastructure, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lots of air conditioning. No, there isn't. Just to keep up, literally with the basics within buildings and maintenance is a huge, huge task in an environment. I'd also tell you, one of the things that strikes me here is many districts are fortunate enough to be able to deal with buildings that have been built more in recent times. They have the benefit of a lot of the green energy, a lot of the energy efficiency. Here we're having to go back into facilities that have plumbing, that have heating that are inconsistent. They're not efficient. So I'm going to come back and answer your question by saying I really truly believe safety, seismic, basic upgrades, renovation, getting buildings open for children just to handle the capacity is really, really a basic need.
So some people would say, why approve the levy? Force it on the legislature to take care of basic education. As long as you're enabling them, it keeps going on.
And I think you raise an absolutely great question. As I sit here before you right now, our superintendent is in Olympia today, talking with legislators about why we need that funding. We know that for the next several years, that funding isn't going to be in place. If we don't do this, we're going to have several years where kids are really going to be hurt. If I knew, and you could tell me for sure, that funding's on its way, and it's in the bank, I think that changes the picture of the discussion. But for right now, with that operations levy that's a 3-year look, we know that we're not going to have any type of full restoration to where it needs to be.
Could you talk, I know this has come up before, but could you kind of outline the idea behind some of the larger elementary school projects that are part of the BECS list? What is the philosophical kind of stance there in terms of building bigger elementary schools?
Absolutely.
So sorry, I'm trying to screen over like 6 inches.
6 inches.
Okay, okay.
Does that work for you?
Yes, thank you.
Because we know that we are having enrollment growth, we also know that having larger elementary schools does create some operational efficiencies for us, and we have seen that throughout the nation, that schools are trending that way. So in our capital levy, what we are asking the voters to consider is a basic elementary school of about 500 students, but because we know we've got enrollment growth, we are building core facilities for 650 students, just in case we need to add some additions because of that growth. So we'll be watching that very carefully throughout the upcoming years. I think the other thing to know is that we are building elementary schools of that size throughout the district, in all different regions, and part of that is because our instructional staff have asked us to build in flexibility for our schools. The larger the school, the more programs we can put in, and so we can bring some of our students who are outside of their neighborhood schools back into their neighborhood schools and provide space for their particular needs and programs.
Are there trade-offs then of having a larger school as well, educationally or socially for kids?
So I think that there is a philosophy that we can create schools within schools and small intimate programs, and that's one of the things that we've seen throughout the nation, that they have been able to provide that intimacy in schools even though they're larger.
I want to follow up just to make a comment that it's very important. Small schools, large schools, do not equate necessarily to large classes. So, a school building of 600 or 650 does not necessarily mean that they are going to have large class sizes. And if we had a lot of time and we got into the weeds, I think you would see where there's some cost effectiveness, that it actually enables those schools to offer some things that smaller schools sometimes can't. I use an example all the time. 2 schools of 300, each requires principal, administrative secretarial staff, custodial, child nutrition services, maintenance, utilities, insurance, transportation. One school of 600 is able to save us about $650,000 of operating costs by that efficiency. I've heard people say, I hear you're building huge schools. That does not equate to large classes. In fact, it may actually enable us with those general fund savings to do what at those schools? Be able to offer some of the additional things that makes that school even a better educational experience for children. It's one of our ways to be able to be cost effective as well as being able to offer still a quality education. So I hope that makes sense to people, that there is some efficiency in that, but that is not the main reason we're doing it. I had a friend the other day ask me about that, and I said, you know, it's a little bit like having a home. And you get married and you build a home, and it's got a couple bedrooms in it, a bathroom. And you say, you know something? I think we're going to have a big family. We might even adopt some children. The smart thing to do when we build this house would maybe to put in an extra bathroom, and maybe plan for where we could put that addition over here on the side of the house. I will guarantee you, if that happens and when you go back later, that will be less costly than if you're going to put in a full infrastructure to add on to the degree that you wish you'd planned for. This is something that to me is about good planning. I want to make one other comment regarding educational specifications. When I first came to Seattle School District, one of the things I did was to walk through several schools. I walked through Hamilton Middle School. Absolutely beautiful, remodeled, just an excellent facility. One of the things that struck me was when I walked through some other schools, like in Arbor Heights, there was truly a divergence in terms of need. One of the things that we have been working on over the last several years is to try to bring more parity into how our buildings need to be built. You've all heard the cliche about good, better, and best when you go to Sears. We'd all love the best. Sometimes what we have to do is look at good and that enables us to spread the greater good for others. So one of the things we've been looking at is how can we make sure that our facilities are very adequate and that we take the greatest good into account of what we can do with our dollars. That's what we're trying to do.
There's some, as I know you know, that you've probably heard an earful from parents on the north side about how quickly you're addressing capacity concerns up there. Can you tell me more about how this levy helps do that? Specifically, I think the concerns center around when you'll get a middle school. I'm not sure if I'm getting the name right. Is it Wilson Pacific? Yeah. So how does this help address that, or if not solve it?
So the BEX levy does open Wilson Pacific Middle School in, let's see,
2017.
17. And so what we know is that we are having more middle school students in the north end, and we have over-enrollment in Eckstein and at Hamilton Middle School. So part of our planning process has to be for planning for that increased enrollment before Wilson Pacific opens up. We have Jane Addams Middle School, which is currently occupied by our Jane Addams K-8 program. We are looking at how we maximize our use of our interim spaces until we have Wilson Pacific open, and so that's been part of the community conversations that we've been having. And as you know, we can have reasonable people disagree, and so that's been part of the discussion. Our board is looking at what our next year student assignment plan will be so that we can maximize space for our middle school students, and then when we have the BEX verdict done and the vote is complete, then we will know how we stage out from there about our enrollment.
So I don't want to misread you, okay? Are you saying that the levy will have an impact on whether or not we start moving borders about what neighborhood kids go to which school?
Correct. We can have our boundary conversations starting this spring after we know what the February 12th outcome is.
And forgive me, but I'd like to hear about how this levy passage or failure affects teachers and their ability to educate and kids, their ability to learn. And so I'd like to know when we might have an opportunity to hear from the principal, or I might even interview Rosalind again later today. Right. And I don't want to halt anybody else from asking questions. But
So Tom, you want to talk about the process and where we are then?
Well, yes, and Christy Collins, our principal, is here, and right after we're done.
Okay.
Unless this is a room-wide interested question, Christy will be able to address that for you.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss an opportunity when we broke.
That'd be great.
I'll just make maybe a concluding comment. I think one of the things that's so important about any city, about any community, are the schools. Schools become critical. People buy in a community because of schools. They want to see their schools well taken care of. They want to see their schools adequately funded. Programs that will help their children be prepared for life after high school. The passage of a measure, Proposition 1, that provides over 25% of our annual operating revenue is really critical. The passage of Proposition 2, the BEX 4, capital levy, is critical for us to take care of that which we have. To be good stewards, not only with our financial resources, but with our assets in terms of our buildings as well. We know that this is really a privilege to be able to consider the use of these funds to help children here in Seattle Public Schools. And again, I just want to reiterate, we do not take that lightly at all. We have been working for over 2 years to try and build an infrastructure, the kinds of controls, the trust, the engagement of the public to be able to get this right. So it is our hope that people will see fit to continue to provide us with this funding in what I'm going to characterize as 2 replacement levies. So thank you very much for being willing to take the questions and to listen to